Welcome, everyone, to the Vancouver Asian Film Festival Diversity in Filmmaking virtual panel series. I am Lynn Lee, the festival director of VAF, and I'm here to welcome you and tell you what's happening at VAF. Let us begin by acknowledging that the land we gather on and streaming from is the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, including Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Thank you for joining us on our fourth of our panel series. And this is actually our third year of hosting this industry panel so that we can help people of color navigate and thrive in the film industry. This year being a unique and unprecedented year, we're celebrating Asian Heritage Month by bringing you an insightful panel every Saturday in May and a bonus panel in the first weekend of June. We wanted to do something special and practical that would help filmmakers of color stay hopeful, to stay inspired, to create and continue pursuing your dreams, and to bring the community together while we can't be physically together. We want you to know that your community is here with you to cope with this new normal. Unfortunately, over the past few weeks, it's really sad to say that the racial tension all around us, be it the Asian community and the Black community, has escalated. And so VAF felt we really needed to do something. That's why we have launched the Eliminate Hate campaign. This is a multimedia campaign to document and transform racist acts against Asian Canadians into positive public service announcement videos made by filmmakers to eliminate this negativity of racism. We want to tell people that there is no racism, no place for racism at all around us. We want people to share these videos to help the community come together to help victims know that they're not alone. VAF's call to action is to stand up and speak out against this violence. So we encourage you to send videos and share videos and go on eliminatehate.org to join the movement and watch everything that's happening on #EliminateHate. We're also very pleased that we're getting more and more community support. VAF is now working with the government of BC's Resilience BC Anti-Racism Network to produce 6 anti-racism videos for the BC Hate Crimes website. And we're looking for filmmakers who can produce 90-second PSA videos in several languages, including Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, Japanese, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. So please check back on vaf.org and the Eliminate Hate website for more information in the next couple weeks. On a lighter note, we have other things happening at VAF, and please join us tomorrow night on Sunday at 7 p.m. PST for our Ask Me Anything live stream on Facebook hosted by Milton Ng with guest actor Kent S. Leung. We'll dive deep into his thoughts and find out everything about him. So if you have questions, please send it ahead of time to ama@faf.org. #AskMeAnythingFaf, #FAF, and #Asian Heritage Month. Now, we also have another exciting thing that's happening every summer, which is our Mighty Asian Movie Making Marathon. And this year is our 15th anniversary. We have very exciting things in store, but observing COVID rules, and we will be making announcements June 15th. So watch out, stay tuned, and come on vaf.org/MAM or #MAM15 to find out everything that's happening. For today, our Diversity in Filmmaking virtual panel was sponsored by our very good friends at the British Columbia Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Multiculturalism Branch, and Telestory Hive. We're also co-presented by community supporters. Without their help, this couldn't happen. Exploration, Vancouver Asian Heritage Month Society, Crazy Eights, Celluloid Social Club, Hapapalooza, Pacific Canada Heritage Center, Museum of Migration, Rain Dance Vancouver, Vancouver Short Film Festival, and Women in Film and TV. And guess what? This panel is being recorded, so you can watch this panel again on our Facebook page and YouTube TV, as well as TELUS Optic TV video on demand educational channel in the near future. And we are very grateful that we get a lot of support from you by watching our programs, but we would also really appreciate your support to donate to us, because a lot of events have canceled and we really need that support to make our festival happen. So please go on vaf.org to find out more and to donate to us. Now for today, I'm very, very excited to present to you our fourth panel, Fireside Chat with Domee Shi, up close and virtual. Now, we are very, very happy to have our wonderful friend Natasha Jung as our moderator today. And she is the founder and executive producer from Coty Collective. And this is a media company that's no stranger to all of you, I'm sure, who shares stories for, by, and about Asian millennials. And our special guest is also not no stranger to FAF. We're so excited to have Domee Shi back. When she was, she just launched her film Bao. We were very excited to be able to have her in Vancouver in real life, talking to Domee when she was in Vancouver. And now more than ever, we need people like Domee who tell the stories and share our stories so people understand our culture, and so we can understand each other more. And so, without further ado, I'm very excited to let Natasha have the platform and enjoy the channel.
Great, thanks, Lynn, and hello, Domee. Where are you today? Where are you logged in from?
I'm logging in from Oakland, California, which is where I live and work. For Pixar. Yep.
Yeah, that's the bio. There you go. Honestly, like I have to say, firstly, thank you so much to VAF for inviting myself and Coty Collective to sit down with Domee today. I'm really excited to share and learn a lot more about your career, and especially the work that has gone into Bao, and hopefully some upcoming projects as well. We'll be touching upon topics such as ideation through storytelling, how representation affects animation choices, including character design, shot choices, and even how to communicate cultural context to studio heads. So for those of you that are tuned in right now, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the comments from wherever you're watching, and we will do our best to get to as many as we can throughout the conversation. And also, feel free to let us know where you're joining in from. So Domee herself just said that she's in Oakland. I'm in Vancouver. Oh, great. Penny Rogers is saying hi from Victoria. That's amazing. Cool. Yeah. So feel free to let us know where you're from. Joshua Lamb is from Burnaby.
Nice.
Yeah, it's just great to see, especially with virtual events now, we can definitely connect across borders. And we're going to have a great conversation today. So I'm going to start asking some grilling questions. Are you ready for this, Domee?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, first off, like the last time you spoke with VAF was in November of 2018 before your big Oscar win. Since then, what has changed for you after you won the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film, either professionally or even personally?
It's kind of crazy. Like those couple weeks leading up to the Oscars felt so surreal. Like you're kind of like transported into this world of Hollywood and LA, and you're going to all these events and meeting all these Academy members and being shoved in front of cameras and wearing fancy clothes and all that stuff. But then as soon as it was over, it was like I flew back to Oakland, and it was like back to work like almost immediately the next day. and it was like, was it a dream? Like that's so, like it almost felt like it didn't even happen. But yeah, like my life, it was interesting because like as I was promoting Bao, as it was being released and as I was doing press and stuff for the Academy, I had already moved on to my next project at Pixar, which is a feature film that I am currently directing still. So it was almost like I took a little break to kind of introduce Bao into this world and talk about it. But then after that was done, it was just back to work and back to what I was doing before Bao came out. So life hasn't really changed that much. I got a lot of like like requests to be in like commercials and in random interviews and stuff
Oh.
afterwards, which is like cool. Like I think a car commercial, like a car company reached out to me, and they're like, and I was like, oh, I guess that's sort of related to my short about dumplings and motherhood.
Yeah.
I'm like, how are they gonna spin that? But I think it was more about like the Oscar and like going for gold and like, and so do our cars. So that was kind of interesting.
That's
I was
so
like
funny.
sort of famous a little bit. Like I got a small taste of it, and but then
Yeah.
life kind of went back to normal for me. So
Yeah, I mean that's you bring up something really interesting there because it's there's certainly it's such an amazing accomplishment to get an Academy Award, but of course there's all that hard work that goes into it beforehand, and then afterwards, you're still a filmmaker, you're still an animator, you're still a director, and so the show must go on. I'm actually based on that too, like you mentioned in your Oscar Awards speech. To all the nerdy girls out there who hide behind the sketchbooks, don't be afraid to tell your stories to the world. You're going to freak people out, but you'll probably connect with them too. I rewatched your Oscar acceptance, and I was just, I started tearing up a little bit there because I think that's certainly something that comes to top of mind for a lot of us, especially people of color that are creators. So to see someone that looks like you on screen, who's told a story that might align with your life story as well, is really powerful. So I'm curious to know for yourself, when was the first time that you felt represented in a film, and what did that feel like?
Oh, that's so interesting. For me, the earliest memory I had was watching Mulan, the original Disney movie, animated musical. And even while I was watching it, like my parents who are from China, they'd be commenting like, that's not how they dress, or like, why are they painting their faces white? They look like geishas. And like they'd be like ripping on those like inaccurate details in the movie. But I was like, I don't care. This is all I get. And she's beautiful and she's a warrior. She's so cool.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's historically inaccurate, like because there was so little out there for us little girls to like attach ourselves to that I was just like, yes. And then I also like remember like shopping for like dolls with my mom in the store, and I'd gravitate towards not the Barbie, but like I don't know if you remember in the 90s, like Barbie had like best friends of like every ethnicity. So I got the Asian, like her Asian friend. I forgot her name, but I think she was Hawaiian or something. And I was like, close enough. I was like, oh, I'll take it. But then, yeah, it was there wasn't a lot back then, at least in like North America and like Western, society. So you kind of like had to, like anytime I had radar, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, an Asian person, yes, yes. And then I would kind of gravitate towards it as a kid. And I feel like now I'm sure it's still hard to find representation, but it's getting a little bit better, so.
Oh, definitely. And it's I don't know about you, but I've started to see a lot more like casting in film and television, not just Asian actors, but Asian characters as well. And going back to your parents' point about like that's not completely accurate or that's not authentic, that's not how it actually is. Do you think that in seeing this representation on screen, like does it have to be completely accurate for you, or like you said, when you're growing up, that even Barbie's friends who maybe they weren't necessarily of the same ethnicity as you still gravitated towards them? Like, do you think that for that, like, do you think there's a spectrum as to which we can connect with characters that look a little bit like us, even if their story isn't exactly like ours or exactly based on our experience?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. That there's this saying about like you can't be what you can't see. So I think like visibility is huge, and I think even like back then there wasn't a ton out there, so you just had to find those like little nuggets of representation. But I think now we can hold representation to a higher standard, like as high of a standard as like representation of other ethnicities, like and you know, like I think audiences of color deserve content that's not just like kind of hashed together, you know, like they deserve content that's like been researched and thought out and carefully crafted, and you know, crafted with love and detail and attention. And I think the biggest difference like between now and back then is like, you know, the people making Mulan and like all those other like most of those movies were like not Asian. So I think it's really important to get you know, diversity behind the camera too. Yeah, so
and that is you hit up upon a really good point there, and that is precisely what you're doing. And it's so great that you were able to do that with Bao. So spoiler alert, if you're on the stream and you haven't seen Bao yet, you can get it on, I believe, like Disney Plus, YouTube, and for purchase for just a couple dollars there. It's a short film and it's certainly well worth it. And it's, I mean, for people that haven't seen the film, how would you describe the film to those folks?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a modern day fairy tale about this lonely old lady who one day is making dumplings for you know, breakfast, and one of them comes to life as this burgly, happy little dumpling boy, and she adopts it and goes through the ups and downs of life with it, and it ends in a surprising but hopefully, you know, satisfying way.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I think that's, without giving too much away, I think you described it precisely that. Yeah. So I do want to go back to a question specifically around Bao. So once again, a bit of a spoiler alert. So for those of you who haven't seen it, but it'll make so much sense after you go watch it after this if you haven't seen it yet. But as a filmmaker, especially in animation, you know, everything is quite deliberate. So for Bao, you chose for it to be specifically set in Toronto, and as I picked up right away on how one of Bao's, if I may call the character Bao, Bao's friends had a Raptors colored basketball jersey and was also of different heritage. And there's also a Canadian maple leaf on the dad's sweater, and in one of the scenes, for example, that level of specificity really helps communicate, I think, at least, you know, cultural nuances, as well as the authenticity of the Asian Canadian experience of living between cultures. Now, you very easily could have not included those details. I'm curious to know then, like, what context did you need to provide to Pixar or even your team to bring those specific elements of your Asian Canadian experience to life?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I think at Pixar, like, we have this principle of storytelling, of filmmaking, which is finding universal truth and telling it in a unique way. And for me, the universal truth of Bao was, you know, motherhood, parenthood, and how, you know, if you love something, you have to eventually let it go and grow up. And like that, I think was like the anchor that was able to tie, you know, everything together, that was able to like help me communicate the story with lots of people, because everyone has experiences with their mom or their dad, or they had a kid, you know, that they had trouble letting go of. And then what made Bao special and unique is, you know, depicting that story with a culturally specific paintbrush. So like you said, those details of the maple leaf sweater that the dad wore, or the little details around the Asian mom character's house. So those things, you know, like I drew from my own experience, like my own childhood. But also I knew it was going to be like, it couldn't all just be on me, because I am only representing one like very specific Asian Canadian experience too. So it was important for me to involve other Asian people behind the scenes in creative leadership positions. So Rona Liu was our production designer. And it was really important for me to have a production designer who had that background and who had that knowledge, because she's Chinese American, just slightly different than Chinese Canadian, but she, like, I could trust that she, would be able to look over every detail and design the world and the characters with like a thoughtfulness, that you could only get from having that experience or that background. So does that answer your question? Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And no, I love what you said there about, specifically choosing people on your team that have that cultural context. I mean, certainly with the stories that we tell on Kulti Collective, and we've certainly partnered with the VAF on a lot of these as well, is we want to make sure that we are doing the story justice by, making it accessible and speaking these universal truths. But the specificity really is what I think, people will find to tell those most authentic details of the story and make people realize, actually that's not just a generalization, that these are very specific choices, and hopefully people will connect with that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually this funny story about how, so as we were designing the house of the mom, one detail that like me and Rona really wanted to put in was like the roll of toilet paper on the coffee table. And I remember us getting like a question from our DP who was Caucasian, and he was like, "What? Like, is that a mistake? Like, why is there a roll of toilet paper on the coffee table?" And we're like, "No, leave it there. It's very intentional."
It's a thing, right?
It's very important. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So it was kind of funny, like explaining all these little things to people that weren't really familiar with it.
So the question then, do you have any tips for filmmakers who might have to explain specifically these choices to either producers or even funders that might not have this cultural context, and maybe tips on how they can best communicate these choices?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I just feel like people just don't know because they aren't really familiar with it. So if you just kind of patiently explain it to them, and explain why it's important to the character and why it's important to, like creating this authentic space in this authentic world, I think usually, I don't know, at least for the people that I've interacted with, like they understand, so like I think it just takes like some explanation or just some and just like relating it to the story and why it's important and stuff. And
yeah, definitely. Though that totally makes sense to me, and I think from that too, maybe it's also like putting yourself in someone else's shoes, or just like kind of like empathy as well, right?
Yeah, it definitely takes empathy from the other party, because there's small details like toilet paper that you can explain away pretty easily, but then there were other notes that we get sometimes of like, oh, like why is it feels like the dad character is really cold, or like he was coming off as like a bad husband because he doesn't talk that much, or like he just seemed really like stoic or distant. But for me, and I think for a lot of people, like this was the dad figure that we grew up with, and it's not like he's cold, it's just he's a man of few words. He expresses his love in like through action, and not so much with like words, or like a lot of other, like I guess more like Western, like touchy-feely ways to, like express love. So in cases like that, like, it's good to have allies. So it's good to have other people who have the same experience and background as you, like, advocate for that, like detail. Like it's good to have Rona there to be like, yeah, I have a grandpa that's that way. And I'd be like, yeah, like my dad was always that way too. And yeah, and then like hopefully you can work with the people who are giving you that note, and like find some kind of subtle middle ground. But then if you can't, then you kind of just have to go with your gut and be like, well, the people who I want to get this film will get it, and the people who don't, that's okay. Not everybody has to love it.
No, you're absolutely right. We just had a comment coming here as well from Andy, saying that one of the characters who had less screen time but plays the role so perfectly was the silent hero, the dad. So yeah, absolutely agree with that, right? We have the dad of the dad.
Yay. Yeah, I mean,
yes.
that was my intention with him, was that he was a silent hero and that he didn't do much, but what he did was very like significant and impactful, which felt a lot like my dad, or like a lot of like older male figures in my life. Like they'll like come in at the right time and do the thing, but then for the most part they kind of keep to themselves too.
They do, yes, yes. So my understanding is that you have a passion for food and of course animation, and you wanted to explore your Chinese culture in telling the story of Bao. Specifically though, why did you think food or dumplings would be able to communicate that experience?
Yeah. I mean, for me, growing up, like dumplings was always like a thing that I would do with my mom, or it'd be like a social thing. Like I remember, being in the kitchen with my mom and all of her girlfriends, and they would just be gossiping and making dumplings before dinner. And it always felt like a very communal, family-oriented food. So I thought it would be the perfect kind of vessel to tell this story about family and motherhood. And also, like uh like I feel like food like metaphors have always been around in my life. Like Domee was actually my nickname in Chinese, in Mandarin. It means bean rice. It's literally the characters for bean and rice, like Domee. And my and my grandma and my parents would call me that, like as a little nickname, like Dodo me, like growing up, because I was the smallest in my family. But then moving to Canada, my parents thought that Domee was an easier name for Westerners to pronounce, so they just made that into my official name. So my name actually means food.
Amazing. So it's really like, you were meant to tell this story.
I know. And then also, ever since I was little too, like being an only child, like my parents, especially my mom, was super overprotective of me. But even as an adult, she'd say like, "Oh, Domee, I wish I could put you back in my stomach so I knew exactly where you were at all times." And I'm like, "Oh, Mom, that's sweet, but kind of creepy."
Anyway, they can make it happen, right?
Yeah. And that was kind of the inspiration behind Bao too. It's like, oh yeah, like what if my mom could actually do that? What if she could return me back into her stomach so she could keep me there forever? Is this what you want, Mom?
Is this really what you want? Is this really what you want? Oh, that's too funny. So with that, I know that, it sounds like there are a ton of iterations that the story went through. In terms of the timeline or the steps from the initial idea to actual release, how long did it actually take to put together the film, as well as how many variations of the story did you have until you landed on the one that we got to see on screen?
Yeah, I think total production time was about 1.5 years.
Okay.
But we had like lots of stops, like hiatuses, because we're a short, we kind of have to work in like in the gaps between the feature film productions at Pixar. So as soon as like people become available for like a couple weeks, like if they wrapped off of like a feature film, we would snatch them for like a couple days to help us on our short, but then we'd have to like give them back to the feature film projects.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like guerrilla style a little bit, where we would, try to get as much done as possible and kind of wait in the wings for people to be available. And we're like, oh my God, there are a couple of animators right over there. Let's get them. Like that. But I was working on the story for like a while before like official production started. Like it started as just a personal project that I was just doing on the side that I just happened to pitch to Pixar. So yeah, like in total, like from when I first came up with the story in my office one late night to when it came out, it was probably like three years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 3-4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you know that for sure that when you wanted to, actually, make it like produce the film, and from creating your story, did you know that for sure like it had to go with Pixar? Like, I guess obviously working there, but did you know that would be the studio?
Well, I wasn't 100% sure if they would go for this story, because to answer your first question, like it was pretty much like the first version of the story I pitched and came up with is pretty much what the short film ended up being. Everything was in there, like the lonely mom, the going through the ups and downs of life in the middle, and the surprise that the eating at the end, and the revelation, like all of that was there from the very beginning. And I thought like, oh yeah, maybe this would be too dark or too weird or too like culturally specific and confusing for them. But surprisingly, those are the reasons why they were drawn to it, because it was really something they'd never seen before. And it took them by surprise. Like the ending really shocked them, and that's why they liked it. So I appreciate that Pixar is into the weird and quirky and out there ideas. I feel like if I pitched it at another studio, they'd be like, what is this? What's going on? But yeah.
No, that's really wonderful, and it's it really speaks to, I mean, a good story, and I'm really glad to hear that, you know, large studios are able to see that as well. We have a question here from Mayumi. Her question is, when you're trying to get your personal culturally specific story made with established producers, the reality is the majority of them might be Caucasian. So when you are an emerging talent, should we stick with our ally who might be less experienced to produce, or should we have an experienced producer to help us elevate? And how can we have both on board?
Oh, that's a really good question.
It's a couple questions in one, so I can repeat any of it if you need to.
Wait, so is the question like, should you ditch your ally for like a Caucasian producer? Don't do that.
Maybe not so much. I think it's more so in the end part of this question is, how can you have both an experienced producer who's more of an assuming that maybe they're not as experienced, how can you have the ally as well as an experienced producer who may not necessarily be an ally yet to work together to help you bring your story to life?
Oh, that's what you meant. I guess, man, again, I think it's about like finding that universal truth, or that and like in your story, as like personal and culturally specific it is, there's something in there that we can all relate to, maybe, hopefully. But like if it's a love story, if it's a parent-child story, if it's like, you know, an argument between a couple or something, there are just some things that like a lot of us have all like mutually experienced, and I think that can be your in for these executives or these producers that don't have that same background as you. And then once you identify that, I think it's just about, you know, it's hard because and it is tiring, but like having the patience to kind of like pull them into your world, you know, like they are the way they are because they just grew up like in a very specific way that's very different from how you grew up. So just hanging out with them, getting to know them as people, and like getting them to see you not just like I'm Asian, but like I'm a person with like lots of different nuances and interests too. I think that's huge. So just finding some way to get to like know them better. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's you know, it's about what I take from that is making sure that the story can connect on a human level itself as a story, but also being able to connect with your potential producers and collaborators on the project. So no, I definitely see that.
And then also like, you know, making sure that their intentions are good too. Like, does it feel like they're trying to change like your story like a lot? And I think it's good to kind of take your own temperature check and see like are they on board with your vision and wanting to support you, or are they just trying to change it into something that's more like digestible for for everybody, because at the end of the day, it should be like they're trying to help you tell your story, not change your story into their own thing. So if you feel like the intention is good, then that's huge too. So
yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think with like, if you take a look at, any job, for example, right? Like, it's not just, if you're trying to get a job, it's not just the employer or producer or whoever interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. So just to make sure that there's that alignment is really important. A question that comes up often, especially for POC writers and creators, is who are you creating for? And, will they get it, right? So I guess in writing Bao, who did you consider to be your audience?
Myself.
Yeah.
It was really, for me, like, to be honest, like when I first came up with the idea, it was just a cathartic side project I was doing on top of or on the side as I was storyboarding on Inside Out and like a bunch of other feature films at Pixar. I really I enjoyed it a lot, but I think I wanted to just do something creative and create my own story, because I used to do that a lot, like in school and as a kid, and I was kind of losing that a little bit. So Bao kind of came out of this need to to just keep my creative juices flowing. But also I was like I said, it was cathartic because I was just putting in all this stuff that I couldn't put in my day job. Like, I mean, as creative and awesome as it is to work on animated feature films, like, you're still, like, as a storyboard artist, you still have to listen to, other people, and you're helping tell another person's story. So through Bao, I was like, well, I want to draw cute old ladies. I want to draw like food porn. I want to like use certain shots and do certain things that I can't do in my day job. And then that's kind of how the short kind of form, because literally Bao is everything that I like enjoy drawing and watching. Like, I love I love watching old Chinatown ladies shopping. I love like gratuitous shots of food being prepared. Like, I love watching cooking shows, reality shows about cooking. And I just like surprising people and subverting their expectations. And all of that, I think I just kind of channeled into Bao. And because I knew, like, oh man, like, I'm going to be working on this for like probably a lot of like many years, so it should it should be about something that I could never get tired of drawing or seeing. So like, for me, the first audience I was thinking of was myself. And then, friends and colleagues who I really trust. And then but mostly it's for yourself, right? It's like an expression of you, and it's I mean, it's a little bit maybe like a it's your art. It's art. It's you make it for yourself, and then and if you're true to that, then eventually you find an audience, I think.
No, definitely. That speaks so much to me, especially for the stories that we share on Cold Tea Collective. So we do articles and podcasts and sometimes video. And a lot of the times when people are sharing, stories based on their own personal lives, we found that sometimes they don't necessarily have the confidence to think that, oh, this is just just my story. I don't think anyone else is going to get it. I don't know if anyone else is going to connect with it. But, what you just said there really speaks to, it is really important to, write these stories or create these stories, draw these stories, however you want to create, like, for yourself. Because if you do it for other people, it's not really going to matter, right? What you do, because if you don't do it for yourself, then, you might be spending, as you said, like, years on something that you might not even find joy in. And I also want to speak to some of the amazing credits that you have in your work at Pixar as well. You've also worked on Inside Out, as you mentioned, The Good Dinosaur, Incredibles 2, story for, and just you just have an amazing resume, and I know there's a lot more beyond that as well. So we have my next question, and also is inspired by Catherine that has asked a question in the chat. Tell us how you ended up at Pixar, and what did your parents think about you going into the arts?
That's a good question. So my path to Pixar was very unique in that it was very straightforward. I think I'm lucky in that I knew ever since I was little that I loved art and I loved drawing. And I think a lot of it came from my father, who's a painter and an artist and an art teacher. He used to teach art back in China. So he was like, so I was always like surrounded by art. And I always loved drawing and telling stories through drawing, because I felt like, I was shy, but as soon as I showed somebody a drawing, they would light up, and it would just be like, I realized like that was such an easy, immediate way to communicate with people and to connect with people. So, but I know that's not the case for a lot of people. Like it takes them a really long time to figure out their thing. But I was just lucky that I figured it out pretty early on, and I had parents that were supportive of it. And I think the internet was also a huge influence on me. Like I grew up, I'm a millennial, and I grew up in the 90s and 2000s when art communities and art forums like started cropping up, and I would post on DeviantArt a lot. I don't know if you guys know that site. I think it's still around.
I do, yeah.
But yeah, and that was like a huge art community, and it really exposed me to all of these different artists, and a lot of them were, women of color, and it was like immediate, easy access to like I could just email them or ask them questions or like look at their work, and it encouraged me to want to draw and post and share my stuff too. And through that, I like asked one artist, I remember like, where did you go to school? Like I was in high school at the time, and they're like, I went to Sheridan College for animation. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to go there too.
And you did.
And I did. And I didn't know anything about animation. I just knew like, oh, this artist I liked on the internet goes to this like school in this program. So I want to follow in their footsteps. And the way I pitched it to my parents was like, it's like art, but you can get a 9-to-5 job and a 401k.
Yes.
Like, animation. They have unions. It's like all this stuff. Yes. I was a very like good, like, little Asian daughter, like pitching it to my parents in this like very Asian parent friendly way. And they were on board.
Good. You had all the things to support you in your pitch.
Yep. And so I got into Sheridan and for the animation program, and I got an internship at Pixar in my 4th year at Sheridan for storyboarding. I think I like really got into storyboarding at school because I realized like, oh my gosh, it combines all the things I love. I love storytelling. I love writing. I love drawing, like actually like physically drawing, because at this point, 3D animation was all 3D. It was all on the computer. And it was more about performance and like almost like digital puppetry rather than drawing. But I just, I knew I always wanted to keep drawing. So storyboarding seemed like the obvious path for me. And then, I've been here at Pixar ever since. So crazy. But yeah, it's very unique. Like I have lots of coworkers at Pixar who've like done all kinds of crazy things before they ended up at Pixar. So there is no one path. So like I just really want to stress that, because I don't want people to think like they're a failure if they don't get Pixar right out of school. Like I have a coworker, she's directing right now too, but she, her path was like all over the place. Like she started in pre-med in school, dropped out, switched to art, worked all across the board, like East Coast, West Coast, everywhere before she ended up at Pixar. I have another coworker, like a very talented story artist. He didn't even graduate high school. He like he's an older dude, so he like joined the military and he like learned how to draw through like copying, like magazines like Vogue or Cosmo. Like he learned how to draw beautiful women through like copying magazines and all that stuff. And he never had like a formal education. So I think that's the beauty. Is like there's no one path. You just have to keep doing it, and you have to keep drawing and keep doing the thing that you want to do like every day, and power through the hard times.
Well, oh my gosh, absolutely. And speaking of hard times, what are some obstacles you've been, I would say, proud to overcome throughout your career from when you first started as a story intern in 2011 until now?
Yeah, I think one big obstacle for me was just public speaking. And I just like my shy, I was really, really, I mean, I'm still shy now, but I was really, really shy going into the internship. And a lot of my shyness came from like in middle school where I developed a stutter. And I think like that was like, it was something I overcame, but I also felt like it helped me in the long run too, because I was so shy and because I was so afraid to speak, that I was like, well, I'm just gonna like work really, really hard to try to let my work speak for itself so I don't have to speak ever again, which I don't know if that didn't work, but but it encouraged me to develop a lot of these skills that I use every day now. But yeah, like public speaking was huge. Like I thought like, oh, like storyboarding, I just have to draw, right? I never have to really speak, but no, like pitching is a huge part of storyboarding, and it's a huge part of filmmaking and even more in like directing in general. It's like you have to talk constantly in front of people about your idea and try to convince them that it's a good idea. So that was just something that I was just like, well, I really want to do this, so I have to just dive in head first and just get used to that feeling and stop running away from it. So I remember when I first, like the first couple of years that I worked at Pixar, pitching was still really like nerve-wracking for me, like standing in front of people and pitching. But I was like, well, I'm just going to try to desensitize myself to this. So then I just signed up for like all these talks, like sometimes like film festivals, like you guys would like invite me to do talks all over the world, or at schools. I would be like, yes, I'll do it. Because I want to share my thoughts with artists too, but also because I was like, okay, if I can just do enough of these, it won't be so scary. And I think for me, like the pinnacle of that was I went to SIGGRAPH Bogota, which is in Colombia. I think that was in 2014, 2015. I just signed up to go. I've never been to Colombia, like South America, ever in my life. And I was supposed to give this like talk about storyboarding to a crowd of over 2,000 people.
Ooh, no big deal.
No big deal. Yeah, and there's like a translator, kind of in my ear, like translating for everybody, like in Spanish. Or sorry, in Spanish too. So I was like, oh, yay! Not all of them will understand English. Okay, well, no big deal. But I was like, man, if I can do this, I can do anything. And so I did it. And then like ever since then, it's like nothing can be as scary as standing in front of 2,000 Spanish-speaking people.
Oh my goodness.
They were lovely, and I had such a great time, and I totally want to go back. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, I just threw myself at the thing that I was most afraid of, which I think is usually a good thing to do. I don't know.
I love that approach, and certainly as a creative, there are so many things, like so many excuses maybe we can make as to maybe why we don't put our ideas out there, or maybe why we're not pitching. And certainly to hear that, like public speaking is one of those things that you didn't allow to be an obstacle for you. And hearing about how you work through that is really inspiring. And it's something that we don't, fear of public speaking is like one of the top like fears, and I don't know, like for most people, but I would say that, to hear how you tackle that and how it actually was able to help you elevate in your career is really inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. We have a couple more questions here. I'm going to do my best to get through all of them. A question from Joshua is, what department in animation do you think doesn't get enough credit with a face?
Gosh, so many. Just in general, like I don't think like the general public knows how, like there's just an army that is behind the scenes working super hard to make this film work. Like I think you just hear animation, so you just think, oh, animators, artists, but there's also like a whole departments of like really, really technically savvy, like geniuses that are creating these tools and these like software and rendering and all of these things like that take an incredible amount of knowledge to make our films look beautiful. That and I don't think they get a lot of credit at all because people don't even know that they exist in animation studios. There's also a ton of people in production that make sure everything is working smoothly. Managers, PAs, coordinators, producers, like people that aren't necessarily like creatively contributing to the story, but they are so essential to making like these films work because it is. I mean, it's just like it's like organizing like a like an army. It's nuts. The amount of organization and planning that it takes to create these films is insane. And like now that I'm a director and I get to sit in on some of these like budget meetings and stuff, or like meetings that I never even knew were a thing. As a story artist, I'm like, oh my god. like I'm looking at all these graphs and all these things that they're tracking, and I was like, oh my gosh. I didn't realize like all this stuff had to be thought out. Like I just assumed like, oh yeah, I walk into work and there's coffee right there. Yeah, okay. But you just like take all this stuff for granted because it's all behind the scenes. So there are a lot of people.
Shout out to those behind the scenes and behind the scenes of the behind the scenes. Like it really does take a lot of people and resources. What's it like to be able to work with the talent and resources at Pixar? And what do you think maybe would not have been possible if you didn't make Bao with Pixar?
Oh, sorry, the like what would not be possible if I didn't work at Pixar or
for Bao specifically. What would not be possible to have done with Bao if it wasn't with
right. Oh man, so many things. So I think like the food and the effects and just the level of detail and craftsmanship that you see in Bao is all just because of the the talented people at the studio. Because all that stuff is expensive and complicated, and I didn't understand how they did it, and I still don't understand. It's amazing. Like a lot of those food shots in the short, like in the opening, when you see mom's hands making the dough and rolling it out and cutting it, we call that like the money shot because actually that was really it was expensive and really complicated for our sim and effects team to figure out like how it's something that you underestimate in real life, but like how do you simulate like dough being rolled out, and then I don't know if you remember in the short, but the mom character like pokes a hole through the middle and kind of does this windmill effect, like this windmill technique, and kind of breaks it off like that. Like looks simple, but it took so many iterations because that's a really difficult thing to do on the computer. And on top of that, there's like flour, there's like texture, like shading details that like it breaks your brain because you're like, okay, if you put like a shading like texture on this roll, like you don't want it to warp and stretch and pixelate too much, like when she's doing that technique. And it was like a lot of crazy issues and problems that the team was able to solve. And all that stuff, it costs time and money and resources. And I feel like if it was another studio, they just wouldn't even think about like putting so many resources to making these to like making these shots of dough being rolled out,
Oh my goodness.
look so good. I think only Pixar would care about that, about getting dough to look right,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely like noticed that when you said money shot, I was like, yeah, that part. I was like, wow, I was so mesmerized by that shot. I do recognize we are running out of time, so I apologize we weren't able to get to all the questions, but I do have one final question that I know that most people are probably wondering. What are you working on next for your own upcoming projects? Anything that you can share with us today?
So I'm happy to say I'm directing a feature film currently at Pixar. I've been working on it for the last couple of years. Can't say anything else about it. Maybe in a year I can talk more about it. But I will say, much like all of Pixar's films, that it's going to be heavily, inspired by the director's personal experience and her personal history. So that's all I can say.
I'm going to read into that and maybe suggest that it might be about like your Asian heritage or culture, but possibly. Can you say anything about that?
It's based on personal experience. That's all I can say.
Okay. As was Bao, so I'm sure it's going to be amazing. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Domee, so much for your time, sharing your story and experience with us. And thank you to everyone who has tuned in from all over the place. And we're so happy for you, and we cannot wait to hear about your upcoming projects. So please be sure to follow Domee on all of her socials and keep an eye out on what she's working on next, and hopefully we'll be able to update you with VAF as well. So thank you again, Domee, and I will wrap up this panel with this fireside chat with a couple of closing remarks, but we're just going to clap together. I know I can't hear everyone, but I'm clapping for you. Yay, thanks, Domee. All the best to you. Take care. Thanks. Alrighty, so bye, Domee. Great. Oh my gosh, what a wonderful conversation. So if you just enjoyed what you just saw, please tell all your friends, tweet VAF, or send us a message on Instagram at VAF Vancouver using the hashtag VAFF and hashtag DIF 2020. VAF and its events and programming throughout the year are entirely organized and produced by a group of dedicated volunteers, so please consider making a donation to VAF.org. And also, we have another panel coming up next weekend on Saturday, June 6th, 2020, of course, at 2 p.m. The topic is distribution for uncertain times. And really, like as we all know, during this global pandemic, it's really caused some unexpected shifts in consumption patterns around the world. And with movie theaters closed, productions halted, and film festivals being canceled or postponed, filmmakers need to find new ways of getting their projects in front of an audience. We want you to join our special guests as they discuss the future of film exhibition and distribution. This panel is going to be moderated by Lynn Lee, Festival Director of the Vancouver Asian Film Festival, alongside special guests including Maggie Lee, who is a film critic for Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, and curator for Tokyo International Film Festival, Vancouver International Film Festival, Cinem Asia Amsterdam, and a Film Lab mentor. Joining Maggie includes Tom Alexander, a director of theatrical releasing at Mongrel Media, and finally, Blessing Yin, co-founder and chief design officer at Seed and Spark. And so we really hope that you can tune into that next Saturday, June 6th at 2 p.m. Thank you again so much to our MAM and diversity in filmmaking producers, Lynn, Regina, Arnold, the creative producers, Mayumi, Natch, Joshua, and all the VAF volunteers for making this all happen. We also want to send a special thank you to all the healthcare professionals, first responders, and essential workers. And again, as Lynn mentioned in the beginning, please check out our Eliminate Hate campaign featuring filmmakers and the public to make their own 60-second public service announcement, submitting them through Eliminate, that's the number 8, eliminatehate.org, and check out hashtag Eliminate Hate for updates. Also, of course, we want to make sure you tune in tomorrow, Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific time for our Ask Me Anything live stream on Facebook, hosted by our friend Milton Ng with guest actor Kent S. Leung. If you have any questions for them, submit your questions to ama@vaf.org. Once again, my name's Natasha and I'm from Kulti Collective. Really proud to partner with the Vancouver Asian Film Festival. Thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon, and we'll see you again next Saturday, June 6th at 2 p.m. Thank you.